Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Blackfish interview. My name is Kristen Solomon. I'm the director of Blackfish Gallery. We're really excited to welcome more of our artists from the Love Politik exhibition and the Be About Love Festival, which is going on all this month, October 2020. Our guests here today are Yana DiMartini. She's one of our members. We have Daryl Grant, Hector Hernandez, and Marilyn Keller. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
for
much.
being here. So we've been conducting these interviews, and it's been really exciting to hear from the artists individually and get a little more of an intimate connection with all of you. So it's really a treat for us. We're going to start off with Yana, one of our members who's been one of our members from the 90s. So exciting. Blackfish Gallery has been around for over 41 years. We're a cooperative located in the Pearl Arts District. And so Yana, one of our longtime members, has a piece in the show, and we'd love for you to tell us more about it, Yana.
Well, I didn't count on being first. But my work there is called United, what is it called? United Front. But it is more of an environmental piece, because I am an artist who really loves nature. Really loves nature. And so all my work is colored with that. And this piece, it's a pastel on colored paper. And it's a part of a series called, and I don't remember all these titles, Similarities and Differences. And it was really mainly a body landscapes. A landscape, but the landscape is a body. So this piece is legs, feet. And the original inspiration was from the gorge. You know, the gorge on the north side, it really looks like coming forward. So that's why it was really like feet walking. And of course, growing up under totalitarian regime, everything is, I don't know, it's just, everything mixes in me. You know, the politics and love of nature. So it just came out like, yes, the United Front, I mean, the communists were tossing it out like we are all united. But I mean it really, we need to be united. And because the feet there, it calls, it's for being a front, you know. So it has not quite a double meaning, but it has that complex meaning. And most of my art has these complex notions, because I always claim I'm not a revolutionary. We were taught or learned under the totalitarian regime not to speak out forcefully. We were playing more, you know, we used to call it between lines. People were reading between lines. And so it's in me. So anything I do, I say, I make is not totally spelled out. It's more or rather subversive. Yeah. We have an old Czech saying. It's in Czech, it's house Tichá voda, břehy mele, which in my translation is still waters alter riverbanks. The Russian Ukrainian writer Victoria Platova used it in her more perhaps poetic translation, still waters run deep.
Hmm.
But I think mine is closer to
Huh.
that Czech old saying, you know. But that's how I work. I tried to lure the viewer to my images, being trying to be sort of flush or, and then looking into it, hopefully realizing what they are looking at, and to draw from that more philosophical than, than radical. So.
Mm. That's really powerful. I think that idea that even when people's voices are suppressed, that art can speak is a really powerful thing. Yeah. I'm going to share my screen so we can all see the piece.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, great.
Mm. Wow.
Exactly.
How big is it, like in real life?
Yeah.
27 by
36.
36. Yeah.
27 by 36 inches.
Inches.
Wow. So 2 feet by 3 feet. Wow, that's
Yeah,
so that's
it's a
pretty
good size. Yeah.
sizable. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
Daryl,
very suggestive.
Daryl, this would fit well into the artwork for the territory.
Ah.
Mhm.
Really powerful. So if you had just seen this as an image without the title, still have wanted to paint it, would it still have been compelling? Like if you hadn't seen the meaning behind it?
Well, it didn't start with the title. The title came to me, when I was working on it.
Uh-huh. But you saw the image that it looked like feet, right? It looked like
Yes.
you, right?
Yes.
And so that represented something, even if it wasn't this title. But
Right. Yeah. Well, it's because I was in that mode at that time.
yeah,
All this nature or this landscape around me, I saw bodies in it.
got you.
So this was obvious. These are feet.
Seems pretty obvious from looking at it. Although I've probably seen the same view as you many years, and it never occurred to me when I was just looking at the mountains. So,
See, this is the inspiration.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, Yana, I'm part of a woman's hiking group, and we've hiked out in the gorge. So my feet have actually been on those trails, and the colors, the coloration and the striation that you captured is exactly what we saw as we were hiking up there in the gorge. It's a very good capture, especially of the tawny soft gold with the green undertones.
Yeah.
That's exactly what is happening out there in the gorge. It's one of the reasons why I love it. It reminds me of my own home. The coloration reminds me of my home in New Mexico.
Oh, that's right.
Oh yeah,
New Mexico has
it's
similar.
impressive.
California too.
The desert Southwest.
Right. Yeah.
But along a riverbank. It's happening along a river.
Right.
Yeah.
The river gives it enough so that the green can appear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
I love it.
Yeah, very nice. It's also suggesting like this reminds me of the basaltic stones that they are like also or very organic shapes. Sometimes even if they are like a geometric, yeah, they are also very organic. And this is the quality also that is a very organic and very very sensuous in a way. Yeah, too, and very very nice approach to the landscape.
And Daryl, it's also amazing to think that this gorge was gouged out by the Missoula flood and formed that way. Water formed these many of these formations and caused the breaking away that created that image.
Yeah, it's true.
Together with the volcanic.
Mhm.
Volcanic.
Yeah.
So my inner nerd in me is coming out and making the connection with so in the Lord of the Rings they have the Ents, which is like the nation of trees that you know, when all the fighting is happening and they're getting burnt up and attacked, and they literally come walking out of the forest, these trees, to fight. And so I love that, yeah, giving that the animation and life to nature, that it's coming alive. It is alive, but especially with so much going on with our climate and environment, the idea that nature is in a united front to standing, you know, to fight for itself is a really cool imagery.
Very, very good imagery. Gaia speaks. She speaks
Mhm.
through all of the elements of the earth. So we better listen.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
better really be united to help to work with nature. Because if we lose nature, we lose everything.
Everything.
Yeah,
Mm,
All elements of our life.
that's right. Yeah, it is core. Yeah.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Yana. We're going to move down to, well, let's go down to our next artist, to Hector Hernandez. And I am actually sitting in front of his piece. So I'm going to move out of the way for a little bit so you guys can see. And then I can share the screen too with the image that we have on our website, because it's a little bit more closer up detail. You can kind
Okay.
of see how big this is back in the gallery, taking up
Yeah.
our whole back wall.
Yeah, that is 8 by 4 feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this, can I
Yeah.
start?
Please tell us all about this piece.
Yeah, and that pieces was made in a single piece of paper of amate paper. The amate paper is the paper that they use for codex and other purposes during the pre-Columbian period in Mexico. We are talking about more than 500 years ago. So when they used paper for writing systems that they have for the Mayas and also for the Aztecs. So this same kind of paper that I'm using this time is to talk about my perspective about immigration. And the images that I'm bringing in this narrative, visual narrative, is based on the codex, the Aztec Codex of Immigration, that is the Codex of Pilgrimage. So in which it depicts the pilgrimage of the Aztec people to find their home, and finally found Mexico City. So that was guided by their gods. And then in this migration process, so they were guided through a series of challenges and also different regions that they went through. And this part is depicted on the low and the upper and the lower left side of the painting or the work that is there. I try to bring all these different elements of the technique of the codex, like the use of ink, and it's pretty much the iconography that you can see in that codex, the Codex of Pilgrimage. We have to keep in mind that there were not so many codexes that basically were left, because all those codices were destroyed by the Spaniards. They were burned. And we're talking about thousands of books, basically. So that we have very few ones, and actually this codex was basically one of the few ones that they were executed after the conquest, with a mix of the style of European style mixed with the Aztec iconography. But still, you see the distinct elements of the Aztec writing system there. And so In addition to that, in the central part of the painting, and also in the right part of the painting, I have elements of the narratives that I bring in always when I'm addressing the issues of immigration, like, for example, the immigration between Mexico and the United States. So as you can see here, so then we have like a wall in between this left side and right side of the mural of this large scale painting. And at the bottom, what we can see is the god of death that imposed this kind of challenge for crossing that border, that wall. And also, I decided to bring applications of metal embossing the top of the mirror of this work. And this embossing, it was part of I wanted to bring it as a part of the tradition of embossing in pre-Columbian Mexico. And not only in pre-Columbian Mexico, but also in current art crafts in Mexico. So this is a way that I try to bring this techniques from ancient times into our nowadays approach to different techniques of mixed media works. So on the right side, we see the depiction of a city that could be a generic city, but in this case, I brought the images of manhood and also the image of a city like Portland. But also we can see here at the bottom, so the coyote, that is a symbol of the smuggler. Either way, we have the butterflies flying over the fence or the wall, or we can see the intervention of the smuggler to help them to cross that border. As you can see, all this is framed with footprints around. And this is a continuous of going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that means that immigration is a constant process and it's a natural process that species experience. In this case, I brought the images of the butterflies because the butterflies not only is a species that is migrating from North America to Mexico, and that part of North America that is Mexico, from Canada to Mexico, but also to bring the images of other species that also migrate constantly between these different regions in North America. So I portray here immigration as a natural process, but we have, of course, political instances that it creates this kind of disruption on the landscape that could be ecocidal as well, could be an attempt to the ecosystems. We see now that some species or some animals are dying, trying to cross the border because for them it was natural to go back and forth in this region. So it's something that I try to portray in this way with this this piece in a mate paper and this kind of paper. So bring this tradition, bring these elements as a document, but not only as a document, but it's also as a continued process that we experience throughout the centuries as a human beings. So borders are artificial, borders are inventions of city-states or political states that basically impose division and challenges among peoples in the region, because if we see the U.S.-Mexican region is a whole region that they have very close ties across the border. So, and we have indigenous groups living in that border that they claim those territories, and both governments of the United States and Mexico recognize those territories as native territories with this with those nations living in this region, but what the wall is doing is cut that that land and impose policies into those nations that they were living for centuries, and they were living in this binational state between Mexico and United States. So this is basically what I'm trying to bring on this piece, and yeah. So I don't bringing the kind of iconography from the ancient codex, from the Aztec tradition, but also from the Maya tradition. And at the top, as you can see, is the god of the death. That is one of the offerings that they found in one of the tombs in Oaxaca, Mexico, and that is the god of death. That is the piece that is embossed at the center top. Uh, that is a piece of copper and a copper plate, but the original piece is in gold. So yeah, that's basically what I try to approach this topic of this subject of immigration from this positive perspective. The positive perspective for me is the butterflies ended up reaching their goal, reaching their destiny, and in those butterflies represents transformation, metamorphosis, and also in the same way that people that migrates, we ended up becoming new beings through this process of and experiences of migrating to a new place. So we are no longer the people that we were at one point when we left our places of origin, and we are becoming other beings and places of destiny. That's why I bring these images of the butterflies. That also they are embossed on different pieces of metal. And also I have other two pieces that are posters that I made out of two murals that I paint, because I've been painting in different murals in different areas around the region. And those murals, one is in Salem and the other is here in Portland, in Southeast Portland, in Powell and 13. And I don't know if you see that mural before, the one that is in Portland, but the one in Salem is depicting that that mural is depicting the life of farm workers working in the fields. Now we know that those workers are essential workers because thanks to them we have food on our tables. And it's something that I painted in 2005 in Salem. And as you can see on the lower bottom, so we see a black and white images of farm workers in the fields. We have the elderly woman still working in the fields with the children behind, and also Cesar Chavez. So this is the politic element that we see here, but I didn't want to make it so, propagandistic. What I try to bring is again the elements of how this ground that is being worked and this land that is being worked and provided to food, thanks to the hands of those farm workers in the fields, creates and plants the seeds for a new generation that are the kids that we see emerging from that land and become this tree of hope for a new generation. And out of that tree, we see the cocoons of butterflies flying away. So that is the message. So we have the second generation of those farm workers that they are now citizens and they are contributing to this country in another way, not just only working on the fields, but this second generation is bringing all this wisdom from those family members that they work on the field, and also bringing the traditions and cultures that they are depicted on those different pieces of sculptures that we see emerging out of the fields. So, and those butterflies fly away, and we have the sun and the moon as a part, the images that are present on the Mesoamerican tradition of the sun and the moon, the duality, the night and the day. And then the top, to emphasize more that duality, is the top of the mural is in color, the bottom is in black and white, representing the oppressive conditions of those workers in the fields. So,
that's cool.
And then of course I have to work around, the different designs, architectural designs of those walls, and work around of those windows to create a composition that pretty much not only plays a little bit with those elements of the design of the construction, but also bring that narrative in an effective way. And then I have the other mural that I paint here in Portland, also along with those lines of civil rights movements. But in this case, I'm emphasizing
Right.
the pacifist movement of the teachings of the peaceful civil rights movement with MLK, with Gandhi. In this way, what I try to convey is the image of a city that is Portland, represented through an image of a flower, of the rose. The rose is blooming, but in each of the petals of that flower, we see the images of MLK, we see the images of Cesar Chavez, Gandhi, Susan B. Anthony, Chief Joseph, as leaders of our communities that they've been fighting for the human rights of the people of this country and also internationally. But by placing them in this flower at the center of the mural, I try to emphasize that Portland honors those contributions and that legacy of civil rights. And because of that, I basically trying to emphasize the progressive tradition of Portland. In both sides, we have elements. On the right side, the Statue of Liberty representing the principles in which this nation is being founded. So that is freedom, and on the left we have the image of the winged victory. That is the victory of the civil rights movements. So that we hope that we nowadays we can see at the end, that those rights, those human rights, can be constantly honored and observed constantly, because we are going through another process of civil unrest, unfortunately. But what I try to emphasize with that mural is that the people will, at the end, through this social movements in a pacifist way, in a non-violent way, will achieve the victory that we are trying to achieve in a way to create a more harmonious society. So basically, those are the three pieces that I'm bringing. So that's why I'm trying to bring a message of hope, love, as well, non-violence, constant struggle for a better future, and also see all these issues that they are natural in a society, that we can solve it in a non-violent way, and also in a more harmonious way. So that is basically what I'm trying to convey in my artworks. And with these two pieces of murals depicted on the posters, and also and the codex, that is also I did an ink on mixed media.
Wow. Can I ask if the original codexes were they more like this, like portraits, or like large size things, or were they books? Were they smaller?
They were smaller. So, but also they were like like they were like accordions, so that they were holding in that way. But there are many different ways that they have they present it, because some of the codex they were painted on deer skin. Some of them they were on papel mate, and some of them they were on other kind of skins, so of animal skins. So, but the ones that they were on paper, they were like accordions. And the Mayas, they were very good. So, for example, all the astronomical observations, all the writing system that recently is being cracked. So, and they are able now to read. So they are discovering amazing things about the history of the Mayas, in particular the Mayas. But also we have, in the case of the Aztecs, we have a huge amount of information throughout these documents. That many of them they kept producing after the conquest, because it was the tradition that they knew how to do it. So it was very difficult to change all of the sudden all that tradition to create, the format of the Western books. So they keep doing codes in similar ways, mixing, the tradition of the Western tradition of imagery and writing, but using, the old, the traditional languages like the Nahua or the Maya. Mhm.
Well, I just want to say, viva los campesinos y traseros.
Yeah,
Because,
viva,
that,
viva.
that connection is really, really deep, especially amongst the Latin community and the African American community. I grew up, as I said, in a small town in southern central New Mexico, just about 90 away from the border. So we were very diverse, not only because of the makeup of the region, but because
Mhm.
we also had an Air Force base just outside of town that most of the personnel that serviced that base, blue collar and maintenance personnel, lived in our town. But we got to interact with all of those families that were coming in from different portions of the world, with their military members being stationed there. And also Fort Bliss was in El Paso, which is again just 90 miles away. And we were exposed to a lot of different lifestyles, a lot of different heritage, many different heritages. And we 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 were taught to work together, to work together for progress and change. And I value that upbringing. I value that beginning of my life, because it also moved here to Portland with us when we came here to Portland.
Yeah, and it's also that I trying to, depict all this different interactions that we have in different groups and cultural groups and racial groups, and in Mexico, that sometimes we are not so aware about. For example, in the Mexican American tradition, but we have these different components, these racial components and cultural components, that they are so diverse too. So, the Latino group is not defined by race, as the Hispanic Latino group or Chicano Latino group is defined by culture. So, and then we have all this mingling of different cultures and fusion of different cultures. And, we have Afro traditions, so that they are very strong. All the rhythms that we have in the Latino community, they have this very strong influences from the Afro tradition. So the first rhythms that they were like impacting Europe were came from the Caribbean area, thanks to that influences of the Afro rhythms too. So and Mexico adopted that deeply in there, because we have African American population. I mean African population too, so that they ended up like melting with the rest of the population racially. And then actually, for example, some of the leaders of the Mexican movement independence, they were Afro mestizos.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for example, Morelos, or for example, Vicente Guerrero. Actually, the first president of Mexico was Afro mestizo. So we have all these things. So this is basically what I like to feel that in my work as well. This mixing of different cultural traditions, this flow of different cultures, and bring different narratives using different techniques and also different iconographies. And that is basically what I try to use in my artwork as well. So as one of the focus that I've been trying to do in my works are, so how to approach cultural syncretism. And that is something that is fascinating for me. So it's fascinating to me, the cultural syncretism.
It's wonderful how closely our paths are aligning, and the more we become aware of that, I think the more progress we will make, and the farther we will go as a race of human beings. We'll get
Yeah.
there together.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very optimistic about that too.
Do you do you think there's a reason why that sort of information is coming, that cultural crossing information is coming up now? Like I feel like I'm just becoming aware of like what you're saying, the Afro mestizo. I mean, the sort of connection between Africa and Mexico, like literally within the past couple of years of my life. And but there were books that were written about this in the 60s and 70s. I know that. I just don't know why no one ever told me about it before. So I'm just curious if you have a sense of why that's coming to light now.
Well, I think in part is because we start um, becoming more aware about all these different components of our culture. For example, in Mexico, I mean, it's obvious that those components are also present in other uh, members of the Latino community. For example, the Cuban community or the Puerto
Mm-hmm.
Rican community or Dominican community. But in the case of Mexico, because of the tradition of well, not the tradition necessarily, it was more as the result of the post-revolutionary ideology that brings this image of Mexico as mestizo, uh-huh, Indian and white, Indian and Spanish. So it was basically the prevalent image that we have, but we have African American population. I mean, African population, African origin of population in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So we have, for example, during the colonial period, we have rebellious movements that they were like fighting for the rights during the colonial period in Mexico, and they create their own independent towns of African population in Mexico. And of course, there were executions, of course,
Mm-hmm.
of African population as well, but they were there. So, and then we perceive, the heroes of the Mexican movement were like also mestizos. But then after the anthropologists and sociologists, they more research about that is discovered, no, not necessarily, because Morelos was not accepted in upper ranks because he was perceived as mulatto.
Mm-hmm.
Or, and then now we, of course, we don't necessarily say that isn't necessarily mulatto as a casta term that the casta system used in Mexico, because it was a casta system. Um, and
And it
in
worked for the powers that be to keep this knowledge suppressed, and also to keep the knowledge of the communities suppressed. I just recently saw a documentary about a community there just across the border, from Brownsville, Texas, that they have a reunion every year. They couldn't do it this year, but they have a reunion that brings hundreds of people whose roots lie in that portion of northern Mexico, to go back to the town where their families originated. Many migrated there from the United States after emancipation and the suppression of the Black community there, but many were actually descendants of the Afro Latin community that existed there. They came away from the coastlines to avoid exposure to pogroms and repressions and and lynchings and killings.
yeah, and that was the other underground railroad, yeah, that it went to Mexico.
Been to Mexico too.
Yeah, they went to Mexico too. And but for example, we have all this how to say assimilation of different racial groups in Mexico at the end, because that is the tendency with the Mexican population or the Latinos in general, that we ended up tending to mix, and the process of miscegenation is very strong. And on the other hand, in the United States, the tendency was, to segregate, to separate. So the groups, they were separated constantly and segregated, creating these towns or sections of the neighborhoods. But in Mexico, it was constant mixing. And of course, there were not necessarily segregation, but there were assigned um, areas, but not necessarily in the way that they were this straightforward separation. But that is the other thing that was very, thank you for mentioning about that. So, because when the sociologists and anthropologists start doing more research about that, for example, the Underground Railroad or going to South, or when they discover more about the traditions of the different Afro Mexican groups in different regions, then they realize that also the racial, so to speak, types of those leaders, they were also African, with African components. So, and then we not necessarily perceive now them as, only mestizos, but now they are trying to identify them more as Afro-mestizos. But on the other hand, we have to keep in mind that we are talking about that the post-revolutionary ideology trying to emphasize the concept of mestizaje or miscegenation in general. Why? Because at the same time that we have miscegenation in Latin America, we have white supremacists in Europe during 1930s, during the 1940s. And the Mexican government and the Mexican post-revolutionary state trying to develop this counter discourse to the white supremacism. So that the purity of the race was the goal to achieve. While in Mexico, because of the revolutionary process, the ideologues of the revolutionary state says no. The race of the future is the mixing of the different races. So it's the cosmic race. So that's why this discourse of the mestizo was very, very strong. Because also we have to keep in mind, we have Jim Crow in the United States during those years until 1960s. So you cross the border during the 1960s, and the first signs that you see is no blacks, no Mexican, no dogs. Is the first thing that you see, and then what you have on the other side of the border in Mexico. So an ideology that emphasizes the pride to be mestizo. Because for the white supremacists, mud people is worthless basically for them, because there has to be this element of purity. So this ideology of the mestizo or the cosmic race was the counter discourse to white supremacism. And part that's what I can. I've been teaching this course. I mean, I've been teaching this subjects at the university
right now. It's fascinating.
It helps me to understand why in Mexico the mestizo ideology was so strong, and sometimes works against native groups. As a
certain occupations were set aside for that population. It's why now you have a specific population that is even more oppressed, and the information about their existence is being repressed. And now with the immigration problems that we have, with the United States stopping immigrants on the southern side of the border, now you have Pacific Islanders, you have Caribbean island immigrants, you have immigrants who've actually made it there from the Middle East and Southeast Asia, and they're all being stopped at that border and the border towns, and there's no place for them to be. There's no money for them. There are no jobs for them. They're stuck in limbo. They are literally refugees at the borders of one of the richest countries in the world, and it makes absolutely no sense. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, it's very sad that what's happening, for example, now on the border, along the border. That's why I try to emphasize the images of the death and the coffins that they are hanging on the walls and the crosses, is because it's not only people from Central America that they are dying, or people from Mexico. Actually, the immigration between Mexico and the United States is becoming like a zero in terms of the numbers of people from Mexico to the United States. Now the Mexican people is returning to Mexico for the first time in history. And it's so surprising, but of course, most of the people migrating now is from Central America. And then we have all these groups from different nations, from Africa, from the Middle East, in the Mexican side. And the Mexican side and the Mexican government is developing this strategy to provide, shelter, to provide basic services to that population that is stationed or is basically keep in that side of the border. And then Mexico is becoming, I mean, not recently, but now more than before, is becoming a place of destiny for immigrants as well. It's not a country that is ejecting immigrants. Is also recipient of immigration as well, and more than now than ever. So, but of course, the Mexican government doesn't want to deal this as a problem, trying to deal more like as an issue that it can't provide, the basic uh, um, services and observe the basic rights of the immigrants. But it's very difficult because Mexico has been pressured by the government of the United States that Mexico has to be the first wall against, immigrants from Central
Right.
America.
It's like
And
a dam. There, the border is like a dam, and this wave of human need and desire and aspiration is washing up against that wall. So within that wave, you have more than just blue collar workers or just white collar workers. You have thinking minds
yes,
and great big hearts and deep wells of soul that can be tapped to create the solutions that are needed at that border wall.
yeah, but the other thing is, for example, we don't have enough workers in the fields anymore. So we, the um, farmers are having losses because they have a shortage of workers now because of those policies. So and that is curious because they perceive that they are unskilled workers, but no, they have skills, because who's going to get you um, um, uh, um, you know all these very beautiful fruits, like for example the strawberries in a box, very well, or put it in a very nice box for you to purchase in a very fast speed, and then leaning on the fields for hours and hours and hours. You have to have those skills. And, the American people are not taking those jobs. So, and they've been, announcing those jobs for many, for a long time. And yeah, people go there and they don't last working on the fields because it's a very hard job. You have to have specific skills to doing that job. In addition to that, plus, the farmers are losing money because they have crops that they are getting rotten on the fields, because there's no one to pick those crops, and all because we have all this xenophobic, racist policies put it in place as well. So and in addition to that, so the process of immigration, especially with those unskilled workers, is don't represent that kind of like a competition with the U.S. worker, because instead of fighting, with other sectors of the economy or the other workers at the same level, basically these workers ended up like occupying a position on the lower level, and then that lift the whole thing. Is the pancake effect, is what they say, the sociologists, is the pancake effect. And that way, these workers that they have the opportunity to get some skills and become more specialized technicians or blue-collar workers, and while these workers that they are the immigrants are occupying those jobs at the bottom of the scale. And then we have this pancake effect that raise all that, but the prevalent and xenophobic and racist ideologies see that they represent a competition, and that is not the case.
It is not.
No. I think that you put it really poignantly in your codex piece with the butterflies, and really bringing out that point that migration is just natural. Even the butterflies come back and forth, and it's been something that has always happened and always been with us. And who are we to create these superficial borders or call people illegal? Certainly, we're really, even since the pandemic, I think has really brought that to light too, is who's essential workers. And we're starting to realize all these people that make our world happen, and how essential they are to everyday life, and really important things like your food, nutrition, like
Exactly.
the
Exactly. That
basics.
cold light of day
Absolute
is being
basics.
exactly,
Yeah.
and the butterflies or pollinators, they help pollinate a lot of the food and floral and fauna sources that we depend on for our cycle of food. Um, it's amazing that it's all interrelated, and if we just lift our eyes, we can see the connections that are necessary for us to continue to survive on this planet. And if we don't make the changes now, you've seen the lack of monarch butterflies
Yes.
migrating, and now these wildfires on the west coast has decimated the population even more and caused a greater stress on the migrating populations that did happen to get past Oregon and Washington and California before the wildfires. Uh, I
Just shows how it's
I
all
found out
connected.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
mhm, I found out
Yeah.
that everything you learn, everything you absorb in life comes back through you in the creative process.
Mm.
Working with
Mhm.
Daryl on this piece that we've produced for the festival has really been has been an expansion of uh, my own mind, my own abilities, my own consciousness, because I had to go back into spaces that I thought I had closed off in order to expand the lyrics that we came up with together. And the question was asked, you know, do you think that people who don't share your religious or gospel um, roots or stance, do you think that they will find some sort of connection to the music that you're presenting? And I had to answer that the music that I sing is all connected. All of the music that Daryl and I produce holds its roots in our African roots and African heritage, and that music has spread throughout the entire world, and it has affected every single music form that we call contemporary now. It has its roots in ancient Africa.
Mhm.
So what I sing and what I know is part of my ancestry. It goes all the way back through my bloodline, and I can't separate myself from it for the compositional portion of it, because that would be cutting off my line of thought. It would be cutting off my heart. It would be cutting out my soul. It's part of me, and
Mhm.
I shouldn't ever negate it.
Well, I think that's
Yeah, and that
a
is
segue.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue to move on to Daryl and Marilyn and tell you more about. But thank you so much, Hector. I think that one of the things that I see come through your work over and over again is not just how stunning and beautiful your work is, and the colors and the composition, but just how you read the tension there that sits between teaching. I mean, you just taught us a huge lesson. You know, I feel like I was just sitting in a college course, that you are able, you're such a great storyteller and you're a great historian. I say this over again, like on repeat, about how artists are historians, and how you know, in a time when we're questioning, you know, how history is being recorded, and how Yana even, and so interesting, these interviews start to all tie together with people, how Yana was saying how when government is suppressing people's thoughts and getting them to speak, how
Mhm.
art is coming through. And I really, really truly see that in your work, how uh, poignantly too, the not just showing us history and the ugliness and the dark side, but there's this lightness and hopefulness to it, and that is always comes through in all your work, and really showing how we, again, over and over in history, that victory has always been on the side of love, and that's really powerful, and it really inspires us, I think, as we're in another time of civil unrest and so much uncertainty and struggle, that it really feels great to be reminded that those before us have brought us through to where we are. And it's kind of like a relay race. And now the baton is ours to take, to make the progress and keep bringing forward to the future. So thank you so much for sharing. And I think that ties really well with what Marilyn was just talking about. And I'd love to hear more from Daryl and Marilyn, and tell us about your piece in the Be About Love Festival.
Do you want me to go?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. My connection to the festival came through Douglas Dietrich and Portland Jazz Composers Ensemble. I had worked with them previously on a piece called From Maxville to Vanport. And this particular ask included me helping to write original music for the festival. And this is something that I'd not really ever had a chance to do before. I've always been the vocal instrument that comes into the project with the project already completed and ready for rehearsal and presentation. So this process has taught me a lot about my own possibilities, my own skill set, and has given me a sense of self-worth and self-awareness that I should have been building on a long time before in my career. But I get to work with Daryl Grant, who has been a colleague for over 20 years now. And Daryl knows my instrument, he knows me, he knows my capabilities, he knows my vocal range. And he was the first name that came to mind when Douglas asked me which composer I would like to work with. And I immediately thought of Daryl, because I know that the marriage of the lyric to the musical segment of it is very vital and important for that imagery to come to life. And I've always been able to sing his music very very connectedly. Almost as soon as I start to sing the melodies, the quality of my voice improves. It's an asset, yes, for me as a vocalist, to be able to take music and interpret it and then to recreate it out on the air. But it's a miracle to find someone that knows that quality and that ability in your voice and is able to spark that release. And Daryl does that for me every single time. Thank you, sir.
Well, you're welcome. So yeah, this was an interesting opportunity for me to collaborate in a different way with Marilyn, because as she said, it's mostly been me calling her in to sing something I already wrote, and most often with her in mind, but I haven't sort of taken ideas that came from her. So it was really really interesting to see what areas she wanted to write in, what kind of topics and themes she wanted to address, what kind of what of our shared musical language she wanted to draw on, and then sort of figuring out a way to put that together. I don't collaborate often. I find myself writing most of the things that I do by myself. I mean, I will collaborate with people from other disciplines to put projects together, but as far as the music goes, it's usually coming out of my mind. And so it was an interesting thing to stretch that particular skill of saying, well, what is it like to try and bring ideas together with someone else, that don't start with me, and there are all different ways to do that. And the other thing is to start with an idea, the genesis of which I didn't come up with, and that's something I'm always interested in, the connection with like visual artists and architects, because I feel like as musicians we sort of get this tune in our head and then we just write it. But when Jana's talking about like looking at the Columbia Gorge and then getting this perception of what it looked like, and no one told you to do it, no one hired you to do it, no one said, in 2 weeks come back with a painting of this, that, and same thing with you, Hector. How do you over time continue to mine this information that you're learning, this history that you're putting together, and then figure out how to make, an artistic statement that really resonates with people. I mean, it's great to have you explain all of that to us, but to be able to just look at the painting and get it without, the story, that's the real skill. So I'm kind of in awe of that. I feel like we work in these different disciplines. So for me, writing music with Marilyn was a way to sort of test my skill. It's like, okay, what do I have when I'm not working with my own materials? Like, what if the material's given to me? What can I do? How can I translate it? And so I really I enjoyed that part of it too.
Oh yeah. He did this thing where I as I can as I conceptualized the songs that I wanted to work on, all of these songs basically came to me in my dreams. And I have a habit of either writing it in my journal or rolling over and starting up my voice notes on my phone or my iPad and singing the idea that hatched in my dream. So to have his organizational abilities at my disposal, he sent me what was basically um, a questionnaire, a kind of a template about themes and items that I wanted to portray. And he asked me who influenced me musically, who were my musical influencers. Well, he of course is one, but there were myriad others that shaped me as a performer and as a human being. So to have the ability to stop and think about that and to to write that down and to collect that really helped towards this process. Um, I'm a shy person, uh, kind of um, almost a hermit. So this pandemic has basically been it's been anxiety, you know, ridden, but it's also been a boon and a blessing because I don't have to go into society as often as I normally would because of performance career. But Daryl also taught me how to budget your time, how not budget your time, but how to marshal your time and utilize it well. He taught me several years back that he works on a yearly calendar, 1 to 2 to 3 years out. Daryl knows what he's going to be working on because that's how he has has settled things. He knows that he wants to spend time with his family. He knows he needs to be able to travel and perform, but he also knows he needs to stop and write. So he takes a sabbatical of 1 year duration to write one piece, and then he dedicates himself to fine tuning and writing that piece, and comes up with these incredible um, treatises, musical treatises, and suites of music that absolutely work and tell the story. And his music should be played all across the world. Everyone in the world should have a chance to hear this man's music. And I'm very fortunate that I get a chance to sing with him and work with him. Thank
Well, one of the interesting things, I mean, I really love themes. It's always helps me to organize my thinking. And so when I heard that this was, the Be About Love Festival, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's really interesting, and that gives me something to think about. And this conversation today is really interesting because I feel like I've actually been taking notes. Like I just was been reading this chapter from Isabel Wilkerson book about caste, and so when you mentioned caste in Mexico, I'm like, oh, here we go.
you.
And then, we were talking about immigration, and then I'm thinking about Yana, I'm thinking about you, and you're talking about coming from a dictatorship and immigration. And I'm like, well, what is your, because I mean, white supremacy was happening in Western Europe. You guys were right at the doorstep of Western Europe. So how was that, in your time in Czechoslovakia? What was the tone like for people who weren't as Aryan or as the, I mean, so it feel like there's so many connections. And I always love the thing that I appreciate now, and what Marilyn said, I mean, and that's really just the benefit, as you all know, of having an academic career, is that the stability of that allows you to think on a longer time frame, and it also gives you the responsibility of adding to knowledge, which means for me as a jazz composer, the tradition of jazz was always like, one record to the next, one band to the next. But thinking about the tradition of, sort of academic study and research is that you keep turning things over, you keep exploring them, you don't have to let them go. And I think that's one of the benefits of having an academic career. And so being able to look into an idea and take a couple of years to explore it and then turn it over and go to the next side. And so I'm interested to move, to sort of take this emphasis and sort of move that into the fabric of the ideas that I'm exploring. And I would love to hear and, see more of the things that you're talking about.
Me too.
Really, really exciting. And I mean, and it's festivals like this that allow those things to happen, that bring the artists together and the ideas together, and sort of bang you up against things you wouldn't, that might have been next door like for years and years, but of course you didn't take advantage of it because you're too busy doing your thing. So that's cool.
I call it a creative crossroads.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly that's like the united front of bringing all these artists together that have all this rich history and thought behind what's happening in the world, and really pressing into that. And so when we all come together and start to have these conversations and realize that there's so many parallels, there's so many things that we have in common ground, more than we realize, and that we're stronger together, that our message is stronger together. And that's one of the really powerful things about this show, is starting to see just the thread that is just through everyone's work. Well, you will be able to catch the performance this Friday night at 7:30. We'll be premiering it on our YouTube channel, and we'll be hosting it on our website, blackfish.com. So I'm really excited to see the performance now. It's so fun to get like a little sneak peek and taste on these Wednesday conversations. And I guess just the last before we go, I think if everyone could just kind of go around and just say maybe briefly what you hope that the viewers watching this, whether this interview or your performance or your piece coming to the exhibition, what you hope is the takeaway from that, what you can impart on our viewers. We can go around the same order. Jana, you want to start?
Well, I think that Marilyn said it very nicely. It's a crossroads, cross connections, rather. That we discover that we all can work together. And of course, artists probably are closest to it, right? We need to be together. We need to cross-pollinate.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So hopefully it'll go further, not back.
Certainly at crossroads right now with elections coming up, and really trying to figure out like where's this country going to go, what is going to happen next. And really without everybody coming together for sure, and having their voice heard, I don't know what things will look like or be like in the future. And so many things across the board, and so many issues and areas that we're facing in this country, between climate change and the racial tensions and police brutality and the pandemic, economy. Like, it's endless right now. It just feels like we're in the thick of it with so many things.
Kristen, do you mind if I go next? Just because I actually have to prepare for some teaching. I got to do it a little bit. But I guess the thing I would that really got me is that you said is that that all of these things revolve, like love has been a part of all of these, sort of successful changes and revolutions. And I think that that's something that we tend to work with ideas so much of the time, and ideas are so important. But I'm really struck by, I've been struck by how Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King would say all the time that, that love is at the center of these things, and that it's not possible to make this change without love. So I love that the festival is a reminder of that.
Yeah, great. So I also I that is inspiring, and actually, yeah, I love at the center, and this exhibition is also. I hope that the same way that I feel inspired by the works of all of you as artists, I also hope that the people feel that inspiration as well for a better world, for a better future, for love, um, and that is at the center of all this.
Marilyn, you have a closing thought for us too?
My closing thought is that this entire uh, process has been a genesis moment for me as a person, as an artist, as a woman, and I can definitely say that I'm very excited about the possibilities of this. Daryl has been there for many of my firsts throughout throughout my career, throughout my life, growing as a person, and so I can see this as a seed being planted that will grow into a tree of many branches, a very wide bole and trunk of the tree with deep roots and far spreading roots that hopefully will spark this happening in more than just in Portland and in our creative community, that will begin to develop lines of communication all across the world through these kinds of happenings. So thank you very much, Blackfish Gallery, and thank you all for including us. And I've enjoyed every step of the way. I really have. Thank you.
It was really wonderful to talk with you all. Thank you so much for bringing so much heart to this conversation. It's really beautiful and encouraging. And thank you all for watching. Please go tune in this Friday and come down to the gallery. We're open Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday from 11 to 5 p.m. You don't need an appointment. Come down, check it out. We are observing very strict COVID protocol to keep everybody safe. And if you still don't feel comfortable, you can check out the Matterport on our website, which has a 3D tour of the gallery. So thank you so much for tuning in. And we will be back next week with another interview with some more wonderful artists. But thank you all for your time.
All right.
Well, thank you very much.
Oh,
Nice to meet you all. Nice to meet you.
interesting.
Thank you.